the Thabo Mbeki Foundation African Peace and Security Dialogue is set to wrap up today in Magaliesburg. The gathering has brought together diplomats, security experts, policymakers and other key figures to focus on peace and security on the continent. Former President Thabo Mbeki is expected to address the dialogue later today. Let's go live now to Khayelihle Khumalo, who's been tracking that story for us. Good afternoon to you, Kaya. So just recap for us what has transpired at this peace and security dialogue. It was, it was built by the Mbeki Foundation as a key platform to focus on issues of conflict on the African continent. We know about the abstention and the snub by the DRC government, but a number of other people participated. What has transpired in the last few days?
Well, by all means, Tilasis, it's been a very insightful and a very informative, really, sessions where the issue of peace and security really took the center stage. You look at the current volatile situation in the eastern part of DRC, the far-reaching implications there where the civilians are really caught up in the crossfire, but also this has been the longest challenge. You look at the recently held SADC summit in Madagascar, it was one of the talking points, but also looking at the Horn of Africa as well, the issue of extremism in Somalia and many other countries as well. But you look at also the unconstitutional changes of government right in the Sahel region. So those are some of the very key issues at Tilasizwe that have really just been at the forefront here. But really, it is the last day, and joining us now is the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Ms. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi. So, ma'am, once again, we know that we started with your address, where you are speaking about the pathways for peace, but the importance of making sure that we deal with these hotspots in the continent.
Thank you. I think it was very important for us to ensure that the Africa Peace and Security Dialogue, phase 2, if we can call it that, is one that clearly builds on what should be done on the continent. As I stated in the opening input, ours is not to engage in negotiation. Ours is in essence to bring all the protagonists together and allow people to engage, to look at what the solutions are. Because we see the role of the foundation to be such, where we are able to, through the various groupings, engage in a manner where there's a journal that comes out that brings the inputs of practitioners and academics, offering solutions to some of the vexing challenges, but with a clear understanding and a determination that Africa must solve African problems. So this engagement have also looked at who are the players on the continent. How are we able to ensure that countries are shaping their futures with everyone in those countries without external players trying to shape what Africa should be or what they would wish it to look like. And I think these are some of the vexed issues we've come up with. But we're also looking at what are these solutions, and the fact that we've got to look at African indigenous type responses to resolving the problems on the continent. And we do have examples where it may have been developed at a community level, but we should go further. But what we've also seen was a bit of almost hesitance to really spell out, for example, what the root causes and real issues are that are at play in Cabo Delgado. And I think there's a need to look at how we intervene in a manner that we can sketch this. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to resolve it appropriately. We've looked at the Sahel quite extensively. And again, on the Sahel, there's going to be a need to look at solutions, but taking into account the reality the context that the citizens are facing and how we can overcome that. And then, of course, the Horn and the Great Lakes are perennial, and I think we will hear through President Mbeki later today whether we are finding solutions or whether there's further fragmentation, and how can we overcome the fragmentation, because there are different layers of complexity, and this requires approaches that's going to take into account what those realities are.
And obviously, Chair, we know of this mantra, the African solutions for the African problems, and we know that there's a great deal of expectations during the course of the afternoon where former President Mbeki will speak comprehensively about this particular dialogue, but also the way forward, given the fact that this is the second edition of this particular talk being held here.
Absolutely. But that's why we're also using this as an opportunity to reflect. And you can see it's in-depth reflection. Where we feel that more needs to be done in terms of analysis, this has been done in the past 3 days and will be done going forward. So coming back to reflections, next year there will be a book that will be launched at APSD 3. And that book particularly looks at the work that President Mbeki has done in mediation across the African continent. We're not going to look at all countries, but reflect very clearly on what are the lessons that can be learnt out from that, because he will be looking back and reflecting in retrospect on what has been done and be able to use hindsight in order to draw on the positives and build on how we will deal, as you say, with African problems through African solutions, because there were solutions provided, but the big challenge has been the execution and implementation. That's been identified as a big shortcoming.
All right. Chair, thank you so much indeed. Of course, Tula Caesar, Ms. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi there, the chair of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, just giving us comprehensively a snapshot of some of the very critical issues. As you know, that it is a second round of this particular dialogue, and it's quite well represented. You have so many individuals, just from all walks of life, really just given the gravity of all these issues facing the African continent. So we'll continue to be stationed here really to give you a blow-by-blow account. Yeah. And we know that at some point, former President Mbeki will take to the podium and give his own reflections as well.